Glory to Ukraine. I'm Oleg Kryshtopa, and this is a story for adults. Today, by popular demand, we address the key question of our time. Are our northeastern neighbors truly cannibals? This is not my invention, but the testimony of Herodotus, the father of history. According to him, 2,500 years ago, Scythian farmers inhabited present-day Ukraine, while a wild tribe of androphagi lived to the north. In ancient Greek, andros means man and phagos means devouring, referring to cannibals. The worst part is they haven't disappeared. What's happening? People are eating people, like zombies. Subscribe to Adult Story to know where danger lurks. In the summer of 2012, 4 men went fishing in northern Russia and vanished. Only in November did rescuers find 2 of them, starving but alive. They struggled to explain what happened to their companions, eventually confessing they ate them to survive. A Russian court acquitted one cannibal and sentenced the other to just 3.5 years probation. Yes, hello our court, the most humane court in the world. Turns out in Russia, cannibalism isn't a crime. Unlike calling the Ukraine conflict a war, which can get you 15 years. They do give such sentences. Now back to cannibalism, or androphagy in Greek. This custom in modern Russia's lands was first mentioned by Greek historian Herodotus over 400 years before Christ. Androphagies have the wildest customs, no rights or laws. They're nomads, dressed like Scythians, but have their own language. Nearly 500 years later, Pliny the Elder also wrote about androphagies in these lands. Androphagi, living 10 days from Borysthenes, drank from human skulls and wore scalps on their chests. Pliny the Elder, Natural History, Book 7, Chapter 2. Later, the last Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus wrote of the cannibals in Russia. This was in the 4th century AD. He said no other tribes wanted to live near them. Living next to Russia always means preparing for a major war. Around the same time, there's another intriguing mention of cannibals in Zalesye, in the Acts of Andrew and Matthew in Ludogeri. This apocryphal text, not included in the biblical canon, describes the apostles Andrew and Matthew's journey eastward. Legend says Andrew went to preach Christianity in Scythia, present-day Ukraine, and prophesied Kiev's great future. In those hills, according to legend, he ventured northeast to Cannibal City, where he nearly became a meal. This city was called Ogre, Myrna, Mermena, or Myrmidon. Centuries later, Russian cannibals appear in the Armenian chronicle of Ashkar-Tsuits. Ancient sources on Eastern cannibals end here. Only Russian folklore remains. Vladimir Dahl, the lexicographer, recorded a grim Moscow folk song about a wife's cannibalistic plans for her husband. Interest in mysterious man-eaters resurged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But why did natives eat cook? Why the silence on this? Science. Russian science stays mum. European science speaks up. Czech historian Lubor Niederle was quite the character. On one hand, he argued Ukrainians, Belarusians and Russians were nearly one people, while on the other, he drew this beautiful map of Ukraine. He studied androphagies and concluded they were a Finno-Ugric tribe living in Russia at that time. His colleague, Wilhelm Tomasik, reached a similar conclusion about the androphagies. The Greek translation of the Finno-Ugric Mordvins suggests man-eaters in Iranian, mord, man, and kava, eat, making Mordvins androphages or cannibals. Some colleagues rejected Tomaszik's idea, but the name-based research continued. On this map of Russia, areas inhabited by the so-called Samoyeds are highlighted in red. These are indigenous peoples subjugated by Russia, united by a common language group: Enets, Nenets, Selkups, and others. They were renamed Samoyeds in the USSR in 1938. Previously, this group was called something slightly different, Samoyeds, hinting at cannibalism. However, historian Alexander Poli believes the mysterious man-eaters mentioned by Herodotus were another Finno-Ugric people from present-day Russia, the Merya tribe. Remember the city of Lyudojerev-Myrna, from the Andrew I called Apocrypha. This likely explains why Russians still deny their true origins. The Finno-Ugric Merya tribe mainly inhabited the so-called Zalesia region, where in the 11th century, Kievan Rus colonists founded the Vladimir Suzdal Principality, where Moscow later emerged. In the 19th century, this man, archaeologist Alexei Uvarov, wrote an interesting book. It was called The Merya and Their Way of Life. Uvarov excavated burial mounds around Moscow and found that, at least until the 19th century, it was the Finno-Ugric Merya tribe who predominantly lived there, not the Rus or Slavs. However, the assumption that the Merya Muscovites were cannibals and androphages is currently no more than a hypothesis. But the pathological cruelty of Muscovites and their rulers is certainly not an assumption. The first Muscovite Tsar from the Romanov dynasty, Mikhail, is also said to have eaten human flesh, although at that time everyone in Moscow did this during the so-called Time of Troubles, as one dynasty died out, and Muscovy could not function without a Tsar. So the local boyars eventually invited the Polish Prince Władysław to reign. Moscow was occupied by Polish-Lithuanian troops for 2 years. Oh, what a surprise. The Muscovites organized 2 militias and eventually laid siege to their own capital. Famine and mass cannibalism began there. Human bodies were salted in pots, and the meat was even smoked. Obviously, the future Tsar Romanov, who survived the entire siege of Moscow, also tasted human flesh. The current bunker dwarf compares himself to the tall Tsar Peter II. He reclaimed, and strengthened. It seems it has also fallen to our lot. Well, let's take a closer look at Peter the Great, a real cannibal, and not just in the figurative sense. He adored anatomical theaters and dead bodies. Once in Amsterdam, Peter was so carried away by a child that he decided to kiss him. In the Dutch town of Leiden, the Tsar and his entourage visit the anatomical theater again. Noticing his companions' disgust at the dissected corpse, he orders them, pardon the original quote, Peter, seeing some Russians' revulsion, made them tear corpse muscles with teeth. Peter, I also liked exhuming bodies in 1697. He ordered Miloslavski's body dug up, dragged to Red Square's execution site, and doused with others' blood. Years later, he had hanged soldiers, exhumed and rehanged. Not cannibalism, but definitely necrophilia. Some role model, eh? Care to dance?
А я что, разве отказывался, что ли?
Lastly, a tale of cannibalism in the Soviet army, specifically among partisans. In August 141, while surrendering Odessa to Germans and Romanians, the Reds left behind saboteurs. A detachment of 13 people with weapons and supplies descended into the local catacomb. The underground members, however, were not warned that there was only one exit from the dungeon, leading straight into enemy hands. The group found themselves trapped. What happened next we know from documents of the Romanian occupation authorities. When the partisans ran out of food, the commander decided to kill and eat some of them. A non-communist man and woman were chosen. Their bodies were salted to last longer. As this food supply dwindled, the question arose of who would be eaten next. To avoid this fate, some tried to escape, while others killed and ate the commander and his companion. In the end, the Romanians arrested and executed them all for cannibalism. Whether today's Russians descend from Herodotus's man-eating androphagi matters little. What matters is that most have now become zombies and cannibals themselves.
And though they face no consequences back home, they'll still have to answer for this. Everyone will. Glory to Ukraine.